Affairs. Hello and welcome to another edition of Student Affairs Live, the bi-weekly web show for student affairs professionals in higher education. We broadcast on the Higher Ed Live Network, a product of EDU Universe Media. For more information on the days and times of our shows, please check out higheredlive.com. Some of those shows are Admissions, Advancement, and Solo Live, happen week or bi-weekly, so check those out. We'd like to thank our SA Live sponsors, Campus Labs and M. Stoner. We're going to talk a little bit more about them as the show goes on. Join in on the conversation on Twitter by searching and tweeting to hashtag SALive. You can also tweet at Mike J. Hamilton or at Higher Ed Live, and we'll get back to your responses or questions that you may have. I'm your host, Mike Hamilton, coming to you from my office at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and thanks for joining me today. I want to give a big thanks to Jenna Magnuski, who is from Northeastern. She's behind the scenes, tweeting and producing this show, so thank you, Jenna. Today's show is going to focus on the newly released ACUHO-i book series, Campus Housing Management. We have the two editors, Norb Dunkel and James Baumann. Norb and James, can you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about where you come from?
Sure. Again, I'm Norb Dunkel. I'm Associate Vice President for Student Affairs Auxiliary Operations at the University of Florida. I take care of campus housing and our student union and recreational sports, the three auxiliary operations.
And my name is James Baumann. I'm the Director of Communications for ACUHO-i. Myself and my team, the short version is if it has words or pictures coming from ACUHO-i, we're probably responsible for it. And so among that was this book project, and along our magazine, The Talking Stick, website, the Journal of College and University Student Housing, and marketing materials for the association, and other member resources.
Awesome. So thank you guys for joining us. We're going to hop right into questions. We have a whole list of them, so we'll see how that goes. If you at home have any questions, please make sure to tweet at us at Higher Ed Live or hashtag SALive. Jenna will filter those, get them in, and we want to hear from you. So to start off, how and when did you first start the idea of this project and this book series?
I'll be happy to take this one. This idea originally started about 7 years ago in a conversation that Eddie Hull, who's the Director of Housing at UMass Amherst, and myself had. And we were basically sitting down having lunch together, having a conversation about the resources available to housing officers not only in the United States but worldwide. And we had talked about the Winston and Anchor's book that was done back in the early 90s, and really got caught in the conversation that it was really time to have something a bit more contemporary, because the world of campus housing had changed markedly in the last 15 years at that point. And we sort of committed to pursuing the idea, but because both of us were involved with leadership positions in ACUHO-i, we really didn't have the time to forge forward with a project of this magnitude. So we decided that once both of us had fulfilled our presidential cycles, that we'd get back together and have the conversation, which took place about 2 or 3 years ago. And in that conversation, Eddie had decided that the amount of work that was necessary, he wasn't able to set aside that time, and at that point, I think James and I had a conversation about James stepping in as serving as a co-editor to this book series, and James, you can take the conversation from there, I guess.
Well, like I said, when Norb and Eddie first sat down and shared the germ of the idea that this was, and had a preliminary sketch of the chapter list and some ideas for who might be authors, it was right up the alley of something that ACUHO-i knew we had to be a part of this, and wanted to be able to support Norb and Eddie and all the authors in this endeavor, putting it together.
Great. So you kind of you answered my next question, which was this planned out to be an ACUHO-i publication?
Well, we answered that perhaps in part.
Okay.
Because the publication that I referred to by Winston and Anchors, that was published by a private company, and we really felt that ACUHO-i, being the association that all international housing operations should look to for resources, should own that title. And so Eddie and I approached ACUHO-i first, and I think, as James has indicated, everything that we were talking about was parallel to what ACUHO-i was certainly doing and producing insofar as resources.
Great.
Exactly. And we also saw it as a wonderful opportunity to engage a lot of our, dozens and dozens of our members were able to contribute to this as authors as well. So, you know, a lot of the things that ACUHO-i does, the end result is a benefit, it's a beneficial resource, but we also like to think that the process of creating that, whether it is the individuals that volunteer to do conference presentations, the individuals that volunteer to write talking stick stories, they're getting a benefit from it as well, just the experience of it. So we saw it as a win-win in that regard.
So talk to me a little bit about where you got the authors from. How did you recruit? Where did they come from? What was that process like? And for how long were you adding in authors?
Oh, that's about 6 questions.
Sorry.
Let me touch on maybe some of the early part of this, and that is that the other book that I referenced back in the early 1990s, the authors of that piece were predominantly academicians. And there were a handful of practitioners, like myself, if you will, that had authored chapters in there. And our conversation was with our colleagues around the country, around the world, that they really wanted to hear from the people who work within campus housing on a daily basis, the practitioners. So we tried to identify the majority of authors as being practitioners. So that was one step we took. The second was that we wanted to find people who had expertise in these content areas. And James and I put together a list, and I don't know what we ended up with, 130 or 140 different individuals who had content mastery or content expertise. And this came from people who had published previously in journals and books, people who have presented program sessions, people who have conducted research, people who have done keynote addresses, people who have been in the business for a number of years. So we found that list. The third part was we wanted to try to integrate new authors into the process. So we didn't want everything written by people who had been in the business for 30 years. We also wanted authors that were younger professionals to be introduced to the process. So we brought in younger authors with an incredible energy and an excitement about a topic that was bringing in new thoughts and ideas about a topic. So we found a balance between the younger professional authors and those who were more seasoned in the work that they had provided. So I guess we ended up with just over 80 authors, and in a few occasions we had to dip into the pool a little deep. I think there was one chapter, James, where we had to go to a 6th author before we could get a commitment on that particular topic.
I think the part that Norb mentioned about reaching out to practitioners is really important for this project because, like we said, a lot of what had been written in the past might be more, is it from the theory point of view or the models behind it? And while those are certainly important, we wanted this to be a resource that people would be able to turn to and find real actionable information and resources that they can put into use doing their day-to-day job, almost immediately. So even some of the chapters we have that are written from people with a more academic background, whether they're faculty members, full-time or part-time, we ask them and challenge them, discuss the theory, provide the background research, but then go out and find examples of where this is being put into action. And it is, so you understand the theories behind it, but then show it being put into action.
Awesome, thank you. Real quick message from our sponsors. I want to first thank Campus Labs, Student Affairs Suite from Hire One. It connects data related to all aspects of student life, providing insight to guide student engagement experiences and reveals a direct connection between student affairs programming and student learning, all in the support of student success. Visit hireone.com/campuslabs, and I believe Jen is tweeting it out right now, to learn how our solution provides the evidence you need to show student affairs brings student life inside and outside of the classroom together to create a comprehensive student experience. All right, that's a message from our sponsors. Back to the questioning. So, at what point did you decide this book was going to become a book series and being 6 volumes to that book series?
Well, when Norb and Eddie first came forward, I think that we referred to it as the encyclopedia of campus housing, and there was the idea of this being one volume. Then I pointed out we would probably have to call it Campus Housing Management and the Deathly Hallows, because it would be about a 6-inch thick book. And so we said, you know, what can we do to maybe find a way to break this out into some smaller volumes that make sense from an organization point of view, but then also you know, breaks down, you know, into different knowledge areas and different knowledge domains that all come, when you put them all together, it shows campus housing management as the total package. But at the same time, we do have individual volumes. So if your job does focus you more on facilities or the res life side of things, that there is a specific volume that you can turn to.
So can you refresh us all on what the 6 volumes are?
Okay, you want me to take care of that one, Norb?
Sure.
Okay, so the first volume is called Past, Present, and Future, and that just sort of sets the groundwork, explaining where campus housing has been and where we think it's going to be moving forward in the future. The second volume is Residence Life and Education, again focusing on a lot of the programming and educational aspects that happen within campus housing. Volume 3 is Facilities Construction and Management, the bricks and mortar side of things. Volume 4 is Business and Information Technology Services. This was a very interesting one because, again, it shows some of the pieces that are operational and foundational that reach across several different domains within the profession, but at the same time, the knowledge to manage and approach those, you know, we thought required some standalone topics as well. Volume 5 is Auxiliary Services and Partnerships. This shows whether it's Greek life, dining, conference services, those other pieces that fall sometimes fall under the campus housing umbrella, or at the very least fall near the campus housing umbrella. And then finally, Volume 6 is Staffing and Leadership, which gets into a lot more of, shall we say, the soft sciences behind communications, organization, management, building collaboration between departments and individuals, all those pieces that that are a part of campus housing, and turned out to be the largest volume in the series.
And Mike, I would add as well that the 6 volumes fell out in a very, very succinct manner. And if you were to take a look at Volume 4, for instance, that James had talked about, the business and information technology area, you know, that is perhaps the fastest moving functional area within the housing operation. Information technology, as everyone knows, constantly changes. So how can you capture what we're doing in information technology in a book and hope that that book would be on the shelf for X number of years and still be useful? Well, the idea is that particular volume might have a 2-year or a 3-year shelf life, whereas a different volume might have a 5 or a 6-year shelf life. So we can go back to Volume 4 and do a second edition on that volume in 2 or 3 years to recapture and bring back up the information for information technology, and can kind of keep looking over the horizon with regard to IT. It stays fresh for everybody. So each volume has its own shelf life or projected shelf life.
Okay. Answering questions from later. That's actually one of the big ones I had. Is how does this remain relevant? But you know, basing it off the series, so you ended up with six individual areas. I'm assuming that was based off of what you just said, and you were talking about your author process and getting authors to do different chapters. How did you come up with the content areas in general? Like, how did you come up with that list of what all of the chapters would be? How did those brainstorming sessions look?
Sure. James, did you want to maybe talk a bit about the body of knowledge?
Exactly. This about the same time when Norb and Eddie first came to us with the project, and they had you know, a brain dump of all the different chapters that they thought would be necessary to give the full breadth and width of campus housing management. At the same time, coincidentally enough, the association was in the process of creating what we call our core competencies or body of knowledge to find out what does it really mean to work in campus housing. And this was a process that we brought in several volunteers groups of volunteers to work on, to brainstorm and discuss what are the skills, what is the knowledge that really needs to happen to understand campus housing management, and also to understand how it works at different levels throughout your career progress. Maybe if you look at it broadly as entry level, mid level, and senior level positions. So at the same time as we had a list of potential chapters, we were also creating what we consider to be the definitive list of areas of knowledge necessary for campus housing. So we could mix and match and look and see, is this covered? Do we need to go in more depth there? That also allowed us to better understand what we should ask the authors to address. It's almost like learning outcomes, to say, when you write this chapter on XYZ topic, here's 8, 9, 10 bullet points that you need to address within that chapter to make sure that it is as thorough and complete as we wanted it to be.
And I think that last point that James made was incredibly important, because we didn't pick Lisa Deco to write the chapter on crisis management in housing because of the work and everything that she has done. We also provided her that list of bulleted items within campus housing crisis management that she should attend to. So she would add to that, and she certainly added much to that outline, but each of the over 50 chapters was provided this very detailed outline of material that we wanted to have covered. And that really tied that body of knowledge together well with this volume set.
And that body of knowledge is contained in that first volume, Past, Present, and Future. We explained a little bit of the background of what went into creating that, and then also that actual information. So again, with that first volume, we really, it sets the foundation for everything that's going to come afterwards, and give some insight into the thought process that went into putting together these books.
So more into kind of the creative process. How you recruited all your authors. You had the kind of learning outcomes for the chapters. How long did you give authors to get stuff back to you? How long did you take reviewing? What did that whole process of actually getting the content take for you?
Do you want to know how long we gave them or how long they took? Because those are two different answers.
Average for both.
Go for it, James.
Yeah. Well, actually, going back to what we were talking about, the process of identifying the authors, and also having these several volumes and several chapters, we were able to. It ended up almost being like a rolling process, where we had an original core. We had these authors had committed. We knew that they would be good choices. We were confident in the subject matter, and so we could make those assignments, and then say 2 months, 3 months after that, we would begin to receive their first draft, and about that same time, then we were reaching out to the next wave of authors, and we would make those assignments, and again, 2, 3, 4 months after that, those responses would begin to come in. So that put, just from a project management point of view, the last thing that we wanted to have was one day where our email erupted with 53 chapters all coming in, waiting to be edited. So, when the chapters came in, Norb and I would individually edit them. Norb, obviously, looking at it from a little bit more of the practitioner's point of view. As I like to say, the only thing I know about campus housing is what I learned from reading The Talking Stick. I come from a communications background. So, I would take a look at it from sort of the organizational flow of the chapter, checking it back up against those chapter charges to make sure that all the content that we asked for was represented in there. Then I would say, on average, we probably went back to the authors for 2 rounds of reviews. Some only took 1, some might have taken 3 or 4, but with that give and take to get them to deliver us a nice solid chapter, and then we turned it over to our copy editor and typesetter who finished it and got it ready for publication. And again, another one of the benefits of having that rolling. I think if I dropped 53 chapters onto my copy editor's desk all at once, her head would have exploded. So.
Yeah. But it was clear too, and James is being very kind, that there were authors that took a month and they had a draft to us. There were authors that we couldn't contact, and they had to step off the project, and we went to a second author, a third author, and I think I previously mentioned in one chapter we had to go to a sixth author to ensure that that particular project was completed. We have a couple of University of Florida staff that picked up very late in the process and picked up a couple of topics and completed those chapters as well, because they were pretty close to where I'm at right now. So they helped us out, man. We're thankful for them too. So all things considered, the way that it sort of layered itself out in these phases worked pretty well. James probably read every chapter 5 times. I probably read every chapter 4 times. And you know, I've told people that we've had this conversation with that, you know, I've been in campus housing for over 30 years, and easily 60% of the material that I'm reading is new information to me. And I can only imagine, you know, the content that people are going to find valuable in this book series when they start reading each of those volumes cover to cover, because there is so much new information, new approaches, new techniques, new staffing models and organizational charts, and on and on. It really does get you thinking a little bit about the work that you do.
And to that end, you know, we had talked a little bit, you know, why are there 6 volumes, and that idea of if you work in a certain area, there would be 1 volume that you could turn to. Even though that is an option, one of the things that Norb and Eddie were very convinced with early on is that regardless of what your job title is, you will find value in each of the volumes. We want the person who works primarily in residence life to read the volume on facilities management and get a better understanding about what that side of the house, the issues that they're facing and the challenges that they're up against, and vice versa. The person who spends most of their day with a hammer or a wrench in their hand, read the chapter on residence life and education, and understand that when you know, when designing a hall, that if you know, this particular feature is asked for to be in the hall, why is that there? How does that tie into building community or allowing programming to happen? You know, those questions that are being asked by other people.
Yeah, if you work as a housing staff member in a comprehensive housing operation where most of the functional areas are under the roof of housing, you probably have a connection and a conversation with the facilities side, the business side, the administrative side, and the like. If you're in a bifurcated housing operation or a split system, and facilities reports to physical plant, and IT reports to central IT, and your financial services are part of the comptroller's office, and residence life is in student affairs, and on, you have much less of likelihood of really good communication and coordination between those entities. And the book series gives you an opportunity to understand all of those functional areas without having to, you know, try to find the project manager who's over in facilities. Well, they have to talk to the business service people because they have the money. Don't forget talking to residence life because they're going to staff the operation and the like. So it really does draw all of the functional areas together rather nicely.
So we have I'm gonna go to one of our people that are watching. I'm gonna call it Winnie Paul. She posted that the series kind of came out at the same time that the core competencies are coming out through ACUHO-i. So how are the two how do the two play into each other? Are they going to work together? Is that the road that ACUHO-i is going? Should this book be matching up with core competencies?
Very much so. Like I said, the original timing was somewhat coincidental, but once we recognized that both these projects were going down their respective paths and respective timelines, we said it made all the sense in the world to bring those two pieces together. And I think that you're going to be seeing from ACUHO-i moving forward, whether it's our publications, our conference presentations, anything that comes out of ACUHO-i is going to be more and more closely tied to those core competencies. I can't understate the amount of work and brain power and really strong original thinking that went into creating that body of knowledge. You know, campus housing is a rapidly changing world, facing a lot of new issues and challenges on a yearly basis. So the core competencies will continue to be reviewed, not unlike the way that the ACUHO-i standards are reviewed within the membership as well. So I think, and what we want to be able to do is, if we're going to say this is what you need to know to work in campus housing, well then ACUHO-i certainly needs to be able to provide the resources that gives you the knowledge for what you're going to need to do to work in campus housing.
Thank you. So, who's this 6-book series geared toward? Who should be buying it? Is this for younger professionals? Is it for anybody in housing?
Yeah, when you look across the housing enterprise, you're going to find staff with a number of different backgrounds. So, and we have these conversations with undergraduate students as well as graduate students who are looking for their select profession, because so many feel that, I get a graduate degree in student personnel, and then I move into a residence director position, an area coordinator position through residence life. And frankly, the conversation should also be that if you have an engineering degree, I have a position for you in housing. If you have an accounting degree, I have a position for you in housing. If you're interested in marketing, yes, there's a position. Research, absolutely there's a position. Because we've got such specificity of jobs now in our housing operations, the information that's necessary and the resources that are necessary is that much broader. So the book series is written for anyone that works in a housing operation, whether they're the engineer, the accountant, the residence director, the marketing coordinator. There's information for each of those in there. And it really doesn't matter whether you're a new professional, recently graduated with your degree, say, in marketing, or if you've got 30 years of marketing experience. The marketing chapter is going to challenge you to understand the comprehensive nature of marketing, and is going to challenge the seasoned professional to think about some things a little bit differently. So yes, it's written for everybody that works in a housing operation, first and foremost. Secondly, a second audience would clearly be those in graduate preparation programs that are looking to either work in housing as a select profession or even work in student affairs in another component unit. Because so much of the information that one gathers and experience that one gathers from housing is transferable, translatable to any operation within student affairs. Because you still have crisis management, you have budgeting, you have team building, and on down the list. And so it would be a good read, I think, for anybody that's going into student affairs work, particularly through graduate preparation programs like student personnel, higher ed, leadership development, and the like. And then I think an additional audience would be the professionals that work within the student affairs operation, the vice president for student affairs, assistant associate vice presidents, those people who have direct supervision of a campus housing operation. It serves as a resource. It serves as an educational product for them. It's something that they could take a look at and have a wonderful conversation with their housing colleagues about on their particular campus. So I think that we see the audiences vary a little bit. First and foremost, all of those working in housing, and then the secondary audiences.
And I think when we talked about those charges that we gave to the chapter authors, part of the challenge for them was, we want you to write a chapter that speaks to all the different levels within the profession that could be reading this. We want it to be challenging enough for the chief housing officer to read it and take something away from it, but at the same time we don't want to perhaps gloss over maybe some of the more foundational pieces of information that the entry-level professional would be interested in having. I think that when Norb and I would read through the chapters, we would look at that pretty closely, and there were times where the chapter might just sort of, so it's just sort of jump into the 10-foot side of the pool with some really deep information, and we were able to go back and say, okay, I understand what you're getting at here, but I feel like that we need to establish some other, we need to establish a little bit more information up front so that we can move ourselves up to these deeper concepts that are being addressed. And when the person who's writing this chapter has been doing it for 20+ years, they fill in the gaps. Those gaps are already filled in their head. So that was part of our editing process, to go back and say, we want you to be able to show the progression, make that translation, and not to flatter Norb too terribly much, but when Norb Dunkel says he's reading these chapters and he's finding all this new information, I think that's obviously a pretty good sign that we're digging pretty deep into the subject matter as well.
You know, I think something else worth mentioning is there are some pieces in here that are U.S.-centric, but the vast majority of the information that we're presenting in these volume books are valuable to housing professionals in Hong Kong or Canada or South Africa or the United Arab Emirates. It really does cross the boundaries of countries in the way that we approach campus housing.
So for those housing departments that are going to buy this set and keep it for the professional development library, are there any ways for them to necessarily work through this in a training fashion? Is there, or will there be? Is there going to be a companion workbook, or are there questions at the end of chapters that prompt discussion for staffs?
Oh, now you just gave us a great idea.
Oh, here we go.
Oh.
Where were you 2 years ago? Well, I think, well, I said, when we introduced this book, and there's been some talk amongst the profession and amongst the authors, obviously, and then when we were at our annual conference this last summer in Minneapolis, talking to people that were purchasing it, we've already heard from people talking about, they wanting to reference these particular chapters maybe as part of their RA training and reference these chapters as part of additional staff training. So whereas we don't have anything formalized in that regard of making this a training tool, I think going back to what Norb was saying earlier about the different pieces and how the different pieces of housing fit together, I think we want people to know that this resource exists for as a way to at least maybe if you are expanding your boundaries a little bit, this is a good first step to take.
Okay, great. I have one more sponsor plug I want to give. This is from M. Stoner. You said it loud and clear in post-webinar surveys and tweets. We want a webinar series on analytics. The data you're collecting is important, but why do you do you put it to use? How do you align this data with institutional objectives? And how do you take advantage of Google advanced features like customized reporting, event clicks, or funnels? Get answers to these questions and sharpen your knowledge on Google Analytics with M. Stoner's 3-part webinar, Web Analytics webinar series taking place throughout October. We are tweeting out a link now so you can learn more about the series and register. Institutions can register for individual webinars or receive a discount by registering for all 3. All right, so talking a little bit about technology, did at any point you think about making this an online series instead of being a print book?
That was certainly a discussed, and whereas plans are not exactly in the works for that right now, I think that you may see future editions of the book appear in an online format. Part of it was at the time when we started working on it, the technology in the electronic publishing world wasn't quite where we'd like it to be. I think when you look through this book, there's a lot of graphs and charts, appendices at the end of the chapters, etc. That, quite honestly, at the time we didn't think that they would reproduce as well as we would have liked to have seen in an ebook format. So with the print, we obviously have that increased control over the layout and what it's going to look like. At the same time, we also really envision this as being a library piece where if a department's going to purchase it, have it on their shelves, and so having it in that print version facilitates the sharing of it in that way and making it a resource that spans across. But like I said, once the hardback version sells out, future reprints will be done in softcover, and we may be looking, again, as the technology improves, we may be looking to go online as well.
Great. So sorry, you talked about being able to interchange the book series, so if something becomes out of date, you can do a new series on it. But I'm assuming stuff like technology, social media has even changed slightly since the chapters were written. So how does the book address, just in general, technology advancement and innovation?
Sure. If you look at Volume 4, excuse me, which includes the information technology piece, you know, the applications of technology are constantly changing. The overall broad pieces of technology seem to hold true for a number of months, a number of years, if you will. And within the volume 4, without giving all the information away, there is a separate chapter on desktop and network services. So what are the software programs available to housing operations off the shelf? What are some of our colleagues in the campus housing business using as programs that they have developed within their operation that are working well that you might be able to acquire? Network services, you know, the wireless or wired system approaches. What are the advantages and disadvantages of both? What are various campus housing operations doing when they build a new building, whether they're putting just wireless in or high-speed wired connections? How do you write an information technology master plan? So how do you account for cycling equipment every year? How do you set aside money to buy servers and routers and racks and on and on? Is all a part of a master plan in information technology that should fit into a much larger campus housing master plan. So as you go through the various chapters in Volume 4, we talk about not only the not only the equipment, but the current applications and how excuse me, and how people are using those applications. So you'll see application development happening every other week. So we've captured, we think, in the volume, the best applications that are out there being used today. And like I say, in about 2 years, if we do a second edition, we're going to do the same thing. I think what we find is that so many of the people that work with information technology somewhat fall on a bell curve. And you've got those people on the front wing that are really out there. Mike, like yourself. You know, you understand technology, you embrace technology, it is a routine part of your business. People on the end of the wing, on the back side of the wing, are still using note cards to do room assignments. And then we've got this large mass in the middle of the bell curve that understand technology is useful, it's beneficial, I think I can use it in this place, I'm not so sure about this place, and our intent is to take not necessarily the people at the end of the bell curve and move them forward. Our intent is to take the bell curve and move the whole bell curve forward. So everyone is constantly advancing and learning new information and gaining an education. And we think that that Volume 4 does that appropriately.
And I would add that along with the technology question, and there were some other chapters throughout the series, like, for example, on facilities design. Or we actually have a chapter called The Future of Campus Housing, where in an effort to keep the book, give it a little bit more of a shelf life, keep it more timeless, knowing that these are rapidly changing areas, what we asked the authors to do was to approach it from the point of view of it's not even necessarily to provide all the answers, but to help the reader understand what questions you should be asking. So the answer for how should we, you know, what sort of servers do we need, or what bandwidth do we need to, you know, serve the students, the answers to those questions are going to change. What, you know, how should we design our new residence hall? What are the latest trends? The answers to those questions are going to change. But if we discuss with them what questions should you be asking, who should you be asking those questions to, and then learning how to put that answer and put it into action, that's timeless. That's not going to change. So I think, you know, when it came to those sort of subject areas, that was the approach that we tried to take.
We're down to our last few questions. If you have any questions, make sure to tweet them to #SALive, and we'll try to get them on before we end. Gentlemen, I'm going to add in a question right now because you guys were talking about things that you thought were really cool in the book series. So what is something that you might have learned, or something that you thought was just really cool that one of your authors came up with that you might not have expected to be in there?
I think the area for me was social justice education, and understanding that diversity is different than social justice. And for me, my learning curve was pretty steep in the whole area of social justice education. Because I had the opportunity to go through the book series before anyone else, at the University of Florida, we've created a coordinator for social justice education in the housing operation because there's such a tremendous need, benefit, and value for a position like that. But I picked that information up and the support of that information through the book series. So that's a snippet for me.
I say I couldn't begin to count the list of things in every single individual chapter that I learned, but I would say from the time that the project began until the closing, one of the things that really jumped out for me was all the chapters that are in Volume 6, Staffing and Leadership. When I see this chapter list and I see words like collaboration or navigating campus politics, things that are very intangible in that regard, the fact that the authors were able to find research, interview their colleagues, and draw on their own experiences, and to provide some real, genuine knowledge and information on how to do these things that you sort of, you don't say, either you have it or you don't, or you like, it's always like, hey, that person always just, can make friends with everybody, or they always are really good at collaborating, and it seems like something that is intrinsic within an individual. There's some great information in here on how to navigate that side of the business, and it doesn't make any difference what your job title is or whether you deal with people or bricks or computers primarily on a day-to-day basis. Those are skills that you need to have, and so the way that chapter came together and the contributions that came in that regard really took me back.
Norb, I think you might have just sold Jenna on the series with the social justice. Her ears perked up. We got a question from Student Life Guru. He wants to know if the authors share any kind of case studies or examples specifically in each of the chapters, or does it depend on what chapters they may be, what different chapters in the book?
I think it varies from chapter to chapter. Some obviously lend themselves to that more than others, but we did ask the authors that where applicable to provide some concrete information. So we have sample budgets, we have sample org charts. There were ways in which to assess your facilities. There was math in the facilities book, which really threw me for a loop. I'm not sure what Steve Waller from Louisiana State, I still owe him for that one. A lot of those pieces, and Norb, you might be able to speak to some more other ones that jump to mind.
There are a lot of lists, samples, examples that we have, and when you think about a sample budget, talking about the different approaches to budget management are important because you've probably used a single type of budget management in your operation. Well, we're going to expose you to 2 or 3 or 4 other types of budget approaches, and we're also going to talk about responsibility-centered management, which is starting to take its way through many of the colleges and universities within the United States. So I think we're offering alternatives, and we're offering the samples and examples and lists and sidebars, case studies. There are some case studies in it as well, but James is right. It really depends on the particular chapter. The history of campus housing might not lend itself as well to a case study as would a different chapter.
So it's like, for example, in the chapter on crisis management, we provide a really in-depth and thorough self-assessment checklist that a reader can go through to find out where they are in their preparation for crisis management on that spectrum. Within, say, the chapter on accessibility, Oregon State University was generous enough to contribute a part of their facilities document that clearly outlines all the different regulations and specs that they use in order to determine the ADA compliance of their residence halls. And again, this is a good example of where we're not saying that you should take that copy it out of the book and say this is what our campus is going to do. But you can use that as a fantastic example to see what are the questions that they asked, what are the areas that they approached, and what were the solutions that they came up with, and then you on your campus can ask yourself the same questions and see the answers that make the most sense for you as well. Those are just two examples that jump to mind.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So here's your chance to make your plea. Why should the people watching, the millions around the world, purchase this book?
I would have hoped that maybe some of that answer came out in the last 40 minutes or so.
Yeah. It kind of turned into a little bit of an advertisement.
You know, I think for myself, as a practitioner, you know, I look for materials and resources that are going to help me improve the work that I do in my job. They're going to help challenge the way that I approach my work. That are going to help me make better decisions because I make more informed decisions. And when I look on the shelves, there is not a lot of material on the shelves for campus housing. There are various pieces within functional areas of housing, but we've got 53 different functional areas within housing that we're attending this information to. So, you know, for somebody that works within campus housing, that is looking for a resource to challenge me a little bit, to provide me more contemporary information, this would be the book series for me. And like I say, reading through it as many times as I have, and picking up as much new information as I have, has been invigorating, you know, to me. In 30 years, you know, now I'm really charged up and energetic again. So look out, I might be around for another 30 years. I don't know.
For me, I've been working with ACUHO-i for 8 years now, and one of the things that I've noticed a lot about the people within campus housing is the hallway conversations that happen at conferences, either at the national or regional level, the emails that go around on listservs. There is such a desire to benchmark, for lack of a better word, maybe, what you're doing against what other schools are doing and what other professionals are doing. There's that reassurance that comes from, you know, I have this idea how to address this challenge, but I'd like to see what other schools are doing. I like to think of this book in many ways as 1,500 pages of hallway conversations that, you know, these are people that have done the job, they've been in the same place that you are, they face the same challenges that you have, and here's the information that they've found that they think can be of use to you. And so to be able to have that and quickly pick it up and see that and hopefully look at it as being an authoritative source for that information, hopefully that will be reason enough right there.
So when it comes to others in higher ed that may be looking to take on a project like this and write a book for their field or work on a series, what tips do you have for them?
Run like the wind. No, wait. No, that's not right. I'm sorry. I take that back.
I think, you know, certainly a tip would be look at the enormity of a project like this. You know, writing an article is certainly one thing. Writing a chapter is another thing. Writing or editing a book is another. But when you look at a half a dozen books and you accomplish that from writing outlines to, you know, having these books distributed in about a 2-year period, it takes a tremendous amount of time. And for us, the evenings and the weekends were pretty well gobbled up over the last couple of years. You know, I thank my wife Kim and son Nicholas for the patience that they provided me when I was still in the office at night or went in on the weekends in order to do this. And I'm sure, you know, James would say the same thing. It takes a tremendous amount of time. And you have to have, in my case, you know, really strong staff support to provide me to do something like this. You have to have it timed right within your career to be able to have that amount of time necessary. That's why it wasn't done 7 years ago, because we were involved in leadership positions at the time. So the timing in our careers also had to be right.
And I would say, in many ways, the lion's share of the work occurs before you first touch the keyboard to start doing the writing, or the pen, or, you know, wherever you are on that IT spectrum. The fact that we spent so many weeks and months in the planning stages discussing what are the topics that we want to address, what do we want those specific topics to cover, and then who do we think are the people that can best tackle those, made everything that came after it considerably easier. And that was feedback that we got from the authors as well. Because if you just went to someone like a Jane Wright from Hanbury Evans, who was the author for our facilities design chapter, and you said, write me a book chapter about facilities design, well, she could go on and on for a while. You know, or some of the, you know, we have some chapter titles that, you know, are the equivalent of several graduate level courses. You know, and you can go on and on and on. So what do you do to set up yourself ahead of time to, I don't want to say limit the scope, but to focus focus it so that you're going to get the most pertinent information and you can address it in the most pertinent ways. That is what you want to have. If you do that up front, it'll make everything that come after it a lot easier.
You know, I would also add, you know, in the writing projects that I've done in the past, I've almost always had a colleague as a co-author or a co-editor, and James and I really balanced one another's skills, I think, very, very well. You know, it's in James' hands right now, the production side, and it's at the printer, and James will probably tell us when it's going to be distributed. But James has been working with the printer and the copy editors and the typesetters from his angle as well, because he's got a tremendous experience in that area. And our balance has been very, very nice in that process. If one person had to handle all of that, it becomes undaunting.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, when are they going to be mailed, James?
First week in October.
Yeah.
Yes. As I explained earlier, the printer is taking a little bit longer through no fault of their own. It just turns out that the same company printing our books is also printing Volume 2 of Mark Twain's autobiography, which we thought our book was big. So we had nothing on Mark Twain.
We have some suggestions being made on the back channel. One of them being from Thomas Kelly. Book 4, if you do ever do pilot an online version, that might be a good space to start with, or do a pilot of just that book. Like he's looking forward to that.
Good idea.
I will throw out the last question, which I ask everybody. I am a tech person, so what is one piece of technology you couldn't live without?
After this project, can I say spell check?
I think Norb is grabbing his.
Yeah.
I have two pieces. One is going to be my iPhone. There's no question, and the applications that I have on it. But the other is my Sirius radio in my car. 70s on 7.
All right, there you go. Thank you, everybody that's been watching, or anybody that's been tweeting on the back channel. I want to give a huge thank you to Jenna Magnuski, who is producing. She is the best live tweeter I know. If you haven't followed, check out the SA Live hashtag. She encapsulated pretty much everything throughout this episode on there. So check it out. I think she does weddings if you ever want to live tweet your wedding. I'm going to thank Norb and James. Guys, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you jumping in. The topic was great. Good luck with the book. Thank you. I'll be back in 2 weeks, same time. My name is Mike Hamilton, and I appreciate you guys joining. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.